As a major research institution, Arizona State University offers the most online bachelor's degree programs, along with world-class faculty and dedicated support. Discover why ASU is ranked #1 in innovation for 9 consecutive years. Tap to learn more.
So, Michelle,
Yep.
we can't go to the Olympics. Well, we can go to the Olympics, but Australia isn't going to the Olympics.
The Winter Olympics?
The Winter Olympics.
Okay.
I mean, well, we're going. Our athletes are going and our news broadcasters are going and anyone who wants to go, but our diplomats can't go.
No.
We've decided not to go.
Well, I get it.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, it's because of what's going on with the Uyghurs and all. But what's really interesting about this situation, what's really freaking me out about it, is the fact that we're not going to the Olympics, but we're still selling steel. And there's all of these dichotomies. And China's still buying our steel, but they don't want to buy our coal. And we're building submarines that won't arrive in time for the potential war that will hit Taiwan. So I really want to talk about China today.
Great.
Because, you know, if you talk about China, half an hour later, you want to talk about it again.
Okay.
So I thought what we need to do is bring in someone who really knows about China.
Do you think this person really knows about China?
I think they do because they have a podcast all about China.
Okay. Who is it?
No. You'll find out after you do the intro.
Okay, great. You're listening to I Spied, the diplomatic boycott of Australian intelligence.
I mean, that's it. We're not sending any more diplomats to ASIO. No. I mean, we're going to send our spies and stuff. I mean, of course, we're going to still steal your secrets. We're just not going to talk to you about it.
Hello and welcome to I Spied. I'm Michelle Stevenson. I'm here with David Callan, and we're going to talk all things China because we haven't talked China in a very long time.
Not since last year, I don't think.
Yeah, not since last year, and there's so much going on. So we thought, who better than to bring in a guest, and that guest is
Matt Bevan.
Yes.
Now, Matt Bevan joined us last year.
Yes.
And talked to us about Putin.
Yes.
And that was really a great episode.
I love a Putin chat.
I love a Putin chat. And
Yep.
in fact, we could probably sort of slide towards Putin while we're talking about China at the moment because there's a lot going on.
I mean, they love each other.
So, and Matt has this incredible podcast. I very much enjoyed it, called China If You're Listening.
Yes.
I don't think China was, but if they were, I'd be really happy. Matt, great to have you on board.
Thanks for joining us.
Lovely to be here. I'll pull you up on just one thing though, Dave.
Yeah.
They're not taking our steel. We don't export steel to China. We just export the
iron
rocks.
ore.
They make the steel.
Yeah,
They
I
make the
know.
steel.
They take our iron ore, turn it into steel, and then sell it back to us.
We don't make things
I
to
know.
send to China. We just dig it up and give it and sell that stuff. The rocks and the dirt. That's what they want from us.
That is what I liked in your podcast, the way you just described it as the magic dirt. Right?
The magic dirt, and I want to specify there is a difference between the buildy dirt and the burny dirt.
Yes.
The buildy dirt, they're still buying from us. They don't want the burny dirt.
They don't want the burny dirt. Are they buying our really magic dirt? So things like the lithium and all the other stuff?
Oh,
Or-
yes.
Oh, they're still getting all of the really super magic dirt.
Just the burny dirt.
Yeah,
No burny
no
dirt.
burny dirt. No burny dirt. No burny wine. All right.
No.
No wine, no seafood.
No lobsters.
No lobsters.
Mate, that's got to be driving them crazy over there.
Yeah. The whole thing is, and Matt, maybe you can answer this. It sometimes feels like they're like children. They cut their nose off to spite their face. They're like, we don't want these things, or is it because they actually don't need them?
Well, they don't need certain. They've cut off the things that they can find somewhere else.
Yes. Yeah.
We are not the only place on earth that has lobsters. We are the place on
What?
earth that sells them the cheapest burny dirt,
Yeah.
but they're happy to pay a little bit more for burny dirt and get it from Mongolia or a few other different places. But they can't get iron ore anywhere else in the quantities that they need, and they can't get various other things, lithium, metallurgical coal, various other things they can't get anywhere else, so they need to continue buying it from us. So they're hurting us, teach us a lesson, but only in the ways that they can do without hurting themselves too much.
Which seems to be the leitmotif of what's going on with China and the rest of the world, in that everybody is doing the bare minimum to basically say, look, we're not happy. So the case of Australia and the US having their diplomatic boycott of the Winter Games. Okay, so a diplomat is not going to be able to sit with his Chinese source in the crowd at the figure skating and, swap information. Bit of a bummer, but really it's a token gesture.
Although I have heard that Queensland is still sending a delegation.
Well, that's the thing. Queensland will, because Queensland have the Summer Olympics, so
Yes.
they're up there to negotiate with the AOC, not China.
But there's still people going.
Oh, yeah,
So it's like, what are we doing?
I think Queensland are worried about making John Coates angry. You might remember that press conference in
Yep.
Japan when
Yeah.
Anastasia Palaszczuk suggested that she wouldn't go to the opening ceremony at the
He's so
Tokyo
offended.
Olympics, and he got very angry.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can cross China, but no one crosses the IOC. No one crosses any Olympic committee. The whole thing that's going on at the moment is we've got a very bellicose, very aggressive China. And one of the things that people keep saying about it, and pull me up if I'm wrong on this, everyone talks about how China is being a bully. Right. The thing about a bully is if you call a bully out, a bully will stop. The whole idea that a bully is essentially a coward
Yep.
with issues. China doesn't strike me as being cowardly at the moment. I think they're being more overlordly. I think, is that a way of looking at it?
I mean, I guess the thing is that it's difficult to look at it in these playground terms. They're using lots of juvenile sort of language and tactics and that kind of thing. We saw their response to Australia's decision not to send our diplomats was literally to say nobody cares, which
Yeah, no.
annoyingly is quite funny. But but I mean, the thing is that you can call a bully out, but if you're still need to get a lift home with that bully after school, then there's only so much that the bully is going to do in order to retract. If you still need things from the bully, then the bully still has a significant amount of power over you. And the thing is that the scenario that we found ourselves in, and this is the battle that we've been dealing with for like 2 years or so, is there are certain things that we can do. We could really stomp our feet and break things if we really, really wanted to send a message to China.
Yeah.
We could go, actually, you can't have the iron ore.
Yeah, no more buildy dirt for you.
I was going to ask that. Why wouldn't we? Like, we could probably sell that Bernie dirt to anyone.
The buildy dirt.
No.
The buildy dirt, Bernie dirt. What dirt are we?
Buildy dirt. We don't
Buildy
sell
dirt.
the Bernie dirt. Remember
Okay.
the Bernie dirt? We don't sell
Okay,
the
it's
buildy
the
dirt.
buildy
We
dirt,
do.
right.
We do.
Can't we just sell that to someone else?
Not in the same quantities.
Yeah.
If we were
Right.
to stop selling iron ore to... I mean, China is our, by far, massive
Yeah.
largest customer of iron ore.
Buildy dirt.
Yeah.
The buildy dirt.
I love that.
It's, a pretty large proportion of the
Yeah.
West Australian
Yep.
economy is based on selling it to China. If we were to decide not to do it, then, well, Mark McGowan, the WA Premier, would be even more grumpy than he is now.
He'd be taking a circular saw and literally cutting Western Australia off from mainland Australia. He would.
I mean, here's a thought. Why don't we stop digging shit up?
Because what are we going to do otherwise?
I just think like
We're really good at it, Michelle.
Yeah.
I know, but
We're good at digging stuff up.
No one digs
We're
holes
really
like
great at
Australia.
it. We're
it's
great at
all
it.
we do.
Yeah. That in itself is a major problem for us
Yes.
because we've literally Australia used to ride on the sheep's back, right? That was the big thing. Wool was our number one commodity.
Yep.
Now it's not. It's become minerals. So buildy dirt, Bernie dirt, any kind of
Yep.
dirt you want, magic dirt. All of this stuff we've got it in spades and it's all close to the surface because literally Australia is one giant tectonic plate that has literally been wiped for millennia by wind and rain and it's like sitting right near the surface. There was that lovely story you had about Lang Hancock flying down that gorge and just seeing nothing but iron ore sitting there in the walls of this gorge and it's like, hang on, cha-ching, money.
Yep.
And that's it. We literally got a piggy bank sitting out west, all
But
over the place.
it literally just makes like rich people richer.
Yeah.
It causes issues such as this.
Yeah.
And not to mention the carbon footprint, what we're doing to the climate.
Mm-hmm.
So why the fuck are we still doing it?
Because we have a government that
I
doesn't want
know.
to change.
I know.
And to be fair, on the carbon thing, the only solution to the carbon thing is to dig up the magic dirt.
Yes.
We can't, if we want to stop mining coal, then we have to mine a lot of lithium, an enormous amount of lithium. We basically have to replace the one that causes carbon emissions with the one that doesn't.
Yeah.
So there's no way that Australia stops mining really at any time in the next several hundred years.
Well, in ever, really, when you think about it.
Really, short of nuclear Armageddon, Australia will continue to mine things. It's just what we mine that will change.
Yeah.
Yes.
So Australia is essentially the Bunnings of ore, right? if you want it,
Yeah.
right, if you want it in ore form, we have it, right?
Yeah.
And, there'll be a bloke wearing an apron and going, yeah, come on in, Barney's Warehouse. That is
Have a sausage sizzle.
Yeah.
Barney's Warehouse.
Yeah, the sausage sizzle is, by the way, the royalties. That's the amount that the
essentially.
country gets out of it.
Yeah, which is pretty much piddling when you think about it. Here, have a free snag. Now, the whole thing is, not only do we have this massive trade disparity that's going on with China, because we do have a few problems, but China is also being exceptionally aggressive in its intelligence gathering in Australia. Well, pretty much all around the world. Interestingly enough, it's what China does really well. It's called grey warfare. Right? That whole idea that we're going to see how far we can push you until we actually step over the line and it becomes kinetic, which is the wonderful military term, which means we are now fighting. So we're sitting, they literally push as far as they can into the kinetic realm. Now, with grey warfare in Australia, I mean, what's really interesting is the case of Nick Zhao down in Melbourne, who was a car dealer with debts, who was supposedly he went to ASIO and said, I've been approached by another Chinese businessman offering me $1 million to run as a Liberal candidate for Parliament. And then he was found dead in his apartment about 2 weeks later. Now,
That's crazy.
Before we go any further, the coroner did say it was a suicide. He died having a mouthful
Likely story.
of antidepressant. But that's the beauty of it is. This is the beautiful thing is the plausible deniability of grey warfare is what China really like doing. They like to interfere with the machinations of government, with business, with industry. They play around with you. They mess with your mind. There's that Svengali kind of effect that they have.
Yeah.
Now, the big problem is Taiwan. Really, that's the end game, I think, for everybody. Would you agree?
Well, maybe. It's very... I'd rather it wasn't.
Oh, gotcha.
I mean, I think, you've got to ask the question about whether it actually is or whether Xi Jinping wants us to think that it's an inevitability and that, there's nothing that we can do to stop China from taking Taiwan by one way or another. And whether he'll actually do it or not, the question is he willing to exchange, Los Angeles for Shanghai?
Yeah.
And it's very unclear whether he is or not. He wants people to think that he is, but I don't know that's true. Yeah, so from what I can tell, it's all about... Yeah, well, I'll do this if you do that, and then do this if I do that, and we all of us want any of it. So why don't you just let me take it? Wouldn't that be the easiest way out of this?
Yeah.
And
Can
I'm
I
not
just
sure
have the sandpit?
Yeah, I'm not sure that it's actually true, or whether it's an information operation.
Again, another piece of grey warfare. Because interestingly enough, there was a panel down at La Trobe University earlier this year where a bunch of Chinese experts all agreed. Basically turned around and they all agreed and they said within 6 to 7 years there will be some military conflict over Taiwan between the United States and China. And then mathematicians said, well, there's a 46% chance that will happen and a 12% chance that will turn into total war. First and foremost, what I like to think is 6 to 7 years, gee, those subs are going to come in handy. But the other thing that I think is interesting about Taiwan is look at Cuba and America.
Yeah.
Cuba and America and Taiwan and China, I think are very similar in that just for locality, they're right next door to each other.
Yeah.
Right. And now the Russians, the whole missile crisis back in the 60s with Kennedy was very much antagonistic behaviour from the Soviets towards the United States. Now, America has been arming China. As an intelligence officer I had lunch with recently said, when I said, do you think it's going to happen? He went, name any other province of China that the US sell military weapons to. So this is the thing. China can be looking at it as a kind of Cuba-esque kind of situation in that it's right next door and it's being armed by somebody else. And, despite all the traditional ideas of how Taiwan fits into the picture, there is that idea that they are sitting there with a threat right on their doorstep.
Yes, but
But
Cuba is not part of the United States, and
True.
And there has been no military issue between the two of them in about 50 years. So
True. Oh, definitely. I'm throwing that out as an example. Historically,
you're
that
absolutely right.
example.
It is the equivalent, but I guess the thing is that Cuba was eventually put in the too hard basket by the United States, and that may also be the case for Taiwan.
Yeah, I mean the feeling is that Xi Jinping is very much, this is his legacy. He wants to reunite China, and this will be his legacy. And as someone said, now he's got no term limit. He's got plenty of time to operate this one. But the way China operates, I just don't think that they're going to go boots to the ground. They would lose so much just in the attempt.
Well, the plan was Hong Kong, basically.
Yeah.
That was Deng Xiaoping's plan, was to successfully and peacefully reunify Hong Kong in a way that everybody liked, and then just go, hey, look, this worked. Why don't you, follow in the Hong Kong example? The idea of one country, two systems, which is, the thing that played out in Hong Kong, was designed for Taiwan and implemented in Hong Kong, and Xi Jinping kind of didn't stick to the plan. He sort of hurried up a little bit and and he sort of jumped the gun a little bit. And before, the events in Hong Kong over the last sort of 4 or 5 years, many Taiwanese people may have been more interested in the idea than they are now, having seen what happened there.
But I think also with the Taiwanese, when you look at the generation that's coming into its prime right now in Taiwan, they don't actually have any connection with China other than the fact that that's where mum and dad or grandma and grandpa came from. They are literally now going, well, we're Taiwanese.
Yeah.
And we don't sort of regard ourselves as Han Chinese anymore. We regard ourselves as Taiwanese. Funnily enough, I met a lovely group of Taiwanese improvisers at an improvising theatre sports tournament. Hilariously funny people, by the way.
Yeah.
Really, really good improvisers. But they were just like, Chinese? No, we're not Chinese, we're Taiwanese. They just don't regard it as something...
And of course, ironically, there is a group of actual, indigenous Taiwanese people going, "You what?"
Yeah. It's like us going, "We're Australian." Well, there is that indigenous population here going, technically, yeah. But so there is that. I mean, that's the funny thing is it's this Formosa, as they like to, it was formerly known. It's that whole thing of basically, it's almost like Israel in that everyone wants a piece of it. And no one really knows why.
So China now seems to be copying it from all sides when we think about what's going on diplomatically. Is that a concern of theirs at all, do we think? Or are they just like, is it just like swatting flies off? They don't really care.
Yeah, well, nobody's really actually done anything that actually means much
to them. Yes,
to them. They really don't care. I mean, they would very much rather be thought of in a different light. They want to be seen as the adults of the modern international community. They want to be seen as the leaders of the international community. But that's the one thing that is being taken away from them, because everybody's calling them out on all these things that they have done. And so that's very annoying to them. But from any other perspective, economic or strategic, not much has really, no one's put much of a dent in them, really.
No, and I mean, right from, I remember back in the day with, as I've said this before, is, the whole South China Sea thing, that's been boiling over since, God, like the late 70s, early 80s, when they started putting those little stilt forts on things like the Spratly Reefs and the parasols and stuff like that. This isn't a new thing. This is just the latest iteration of an ongoing diplomatic crisis. And I mean, with China play a long game. They play a generational game where we play a 24-hour news cycle game. And I mean, that's where they've actually got the chops over us. They can wait us out. They can literally go, okay, you can scream and shout and not come to the Olympics. But the bottom line is, if you want us to keep buying your steel, and they will, they'll keep buying it. They'll keep buying the buildy dirt. They love the buildy dirt. They're addicted to buildy dirt. You will come and play the game. And I think that's the problem. I mean, with them not answering our calls, it's like the worst breakup in high school ever. It's like, it's literally like, I'm not going to take your calls, but can I borrow your car? It's that weird sort of dichotomy of what's going on.
Yeah, and I've always found that really interesting, the whole relationship that most countries have with China, particularly the US. I mean, the US pretty much owe them a lot of money. Like China owns them, essentially.
Yeah.
And you've got them saying, well, we're not going to come to the Olympics. And they're like, okay, but like still, we own you.
Fine, don't come. Be like that.
They do, though, but also the funny thing about China is that they haven't quite developed enough new developed countries to be able to let go of the importance of selling things to the United States.
Yes.
Selling things to the Western world is a very, 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 very significant part of their economy.
Yeah.
And if they were to not be able to do that to the largest economy, that would be a very big problem for them, which is why they are, keen at trying to develop new places to sell their things to in Central Asia and Africa and that kind of thing, try and, encourage development in those parts of the world so that new people will be there to buy the products that they make. But yeah, they haven't got there yet. So
Now,
they
what
do
about-
still need the United States.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. They definitely need the US.
Now, what about their reach? They seem to be, spreading their wings into, closer to Australia, into a lot of the island nations. They'll go in there, they'll build roads, they'll ingratiate themselves.
There's a great website at the moment. It's called The Forge. And essentially, it's the Australian Defence Force's way of going, well, this is our strategic way of looking at things. And there's a strategic test case, right? And interestingly enough, we can talk about wargaming stuff. But this interesting test case where they've said, the Missourians, which is the Missourians are essentially our fictitious enemy. Look at me, I can't speak. Right, so it's this enemy that has been created and basically breaks down into whatever our largest enemy target would be. And essentially the Missourians have gone to this. They've lost their fishing fields in South China Sea. So they've now gone down to try and get into the largest tuna fields in the world, which is South Pacific. While they're there, they're then courting these South Pacific nations. And, there was an accident in space and that Australian satellite you use for telecommunications was knocked out of orbit. Look, don't worry, we'll give you one of ours. Gratis, don't worry about it. And by the way, here's a lot more aid to help you out. And by the way, you may probably need a new port down there. Can we build you a new port? And the whole Belt and Road thing is their way of disconnecting countries' traditional allies with small nations like Australia with the South Pacific.
Yeah.
It detaches us from that nation and allows them to move in there. And that becomes a vote in the UN, right? It's a vote in the UN, and it also gives them access to oil fields, to fishing fields, to all of this stuff that they can't get at home.
Well, it's kind of what we did to Papua New Guinea.
Yeah.
We just went in, did not give a fuck about the people, and it just went in and said, we're going to build a whole bunch of things, but by the way, can we have all the shit that you have in your earth?
Yeah, can we have your electrical dirt? That electrical copper dirt's really good.
Yeah.
I like that.
The interesting thing on that, though, is that at least it now appears that the Australian government has noticed this and is starting to take this seriously. Australia, throughout the mid part of the last decade, was sort of not particularly interested in this part of the world.
Yeah.
And, was decreasing foreign aid and that kind of thing. We seem to have realised that we can't really do that now, and the government is now moving into this quite seriously. We've seen recently the Australian government backing Telstra to buy basically the mobile phone network in the Pacific Islands, which is a clear move that they don't want China to have it. So, what's it going to cost? Okay. Well,
that was the thing. China was bidding for it and Telstra just went, whatever they're paying, we'll double it. Essentially, they went, no, we'll own that. Thank you. And there is that thing where Australia is sort of like going, we don't have to. Yeah, they're our friends. They're fine. They're the neighbours. And it's like, no, when the neighbours, when they board up that gate that they built between, your place and their place in the fence, when they board that up, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
So Australia does need to break down these fences and make sure it happens. I mean, New Zealand's the other interesting case because they're very much courting China. And, they've sort of turned around and gone, yeah, whatever China wants, that's fine. We won't do anything. And there is that sort of thing where it's like, yeah, we're in a state of flux, as the old Chinese curse goes. May you live in interesting times.
Well, the Victorian government were courting China until they got told to.
Well, the New South Wales would. Every government in Australia, state government, they were all doing it.
Yeah, but then
it's free money.
But then
not free money.
Victoria kind of firmly got told that they had to shut it down.
But the federal government, in the meanwhile, had a similar arrangement. Yep. So it's like, I mean, we could get into domestic politics, but I'd probably just wind up shouting.
Yes, that's true. So let's talk subs.
Yeah, let's talk subs, because I understand that you're a big fan of subs.
Love subs.
Yeah, I go for the footlong with meatballs.
Yeah,
had to go there.
Yeah, you
That's
did.
right.
Yeah, you
Right.
did.
I was very fascinated with by just basically looking at why you would want nuclear submarines and what the advantages of them are.
We were all fascinated by that.
I know. I loved it. I was so excited.
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you, I do know people in the Navy that just went, we're getting nuclear submarines? Yeah, they're stoked.
Yeah.
But
I mean, the thing is, I guess, what are they for? What they're for is very different to what we would usually use submarines for.
Exactly.
What Australia has traditionally needed submarines for is sort of defending an area pretty close to Australia, and what diesel electric submarines, which is what we have always had in the past, are very good at is moving quietly around very, very, very quietly and, not having too many problems and being very well-established technology, being very good at operating pretty close to your country.
Yeah.
What nuclear submarines are very good at is hiding under the ice cap for years at a time and operating an extremely long distance away from your country, neither of which we have ever had any use for at all in the past. But obviously, we've decided that we now have a significant use for the second one. A diesel-electric submarine, if you want... to go and lurk, as submarines do, lurk in the South China Sea.
Yeah.
Basically, by the time you get there, you have to turn around and come home because you're going to be out of petrol. But a nuclear submarine, you can go lurk for as long as you want in the basically, your limitation is how much food you can carry with
exactly.
you for your submariners. It's not the amount of fuel. You barely ever need to surface. In fact, pretty much never. So you can just stay there. It's your limitations is keeping your crew sane and fed, which is great if your intention is to lurk in the South China Sea. Totally pointless if your purpose is to lurk in the Arafura Sea and in the eastern parts of the Indian Ocean, which is traditionally what it was for.
I am going to pull you up there a little bit because the Australian Collins-class submarine and the Oberon-class submarines have had quite a few successes in the South China Sea. There are a few operations that have happened where what the diesel subs are also really good for is littoral work. So getting in close to coastlines because their draft is so small, right? They've got a very shallow draft. So you can get those subs in really, 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 really close. And there is the story that we talk about where one of our Oberon-class submarines literally sat at the entrance of a harbour in the South China Sea or off Vietnam and was basically tracking a Russian sub as it came into port. So we've had a lot of success, but basically that means at some point it surfaced halfway to the South China Sea, had a fuel stop, and everyone's got out,
Stretch their legs.
Yeah, stretch their legs, got a drink from the fridge.
Toilet break.
Yeah, can I have the keys?
Yeah.
All that really only works if Singapore is willing to refuel.
Bingo.
Yes.
Yeah. They've got to have somewhere to refuel, and it's really difficult to refuel a submarine at sea, I should imagine. But the thing that I also find interesting about this is basically the way the technology is going is most submarines are going to wind up being drones in 20 years. And you're not going to have people on them. So you can literally, like a nuclear submarine would be fabulous because you just send it out and leave it out there and just move it around when you need to. But, the idea of having a manned nuclear submarine off Australian coastline is kind of irrelevant.
So China must be looking at this rather closely. Not only do we have this new alliance with, the UK and the US, but we're going to produce these nuclear submarines, which will have the capability to go and, hang out.
Well, are we going to produce?
I know. I mean, we say it. We're talking about like something that's going to happen in about 5,000 years.
Yeah.
If ever.
I think it's becoming increasingly clear that part of the point of the submarine deal is that we, in the meantime, can guarantee closer cooperation with the United States. It's not so much about the submarines arriving in the end. I mean, that'd be fine. But in the meantime, it would be great if we had, basically intertwined defence agencies particularly if they give us some sweet, juicy nuclear submarine secrets.
Oh, yeah.
Then, we're so intertwined, they really have, less option of abandoning us if if things get interesting. So I think it's pretty clear that that's at least a part of the point.
Yeah.
And the actual submarines are sort of, sure, okay, yeah. Well, I have some submarines, I suppose.
But have some. Enjoy. Now, there was one thing that you mentioned in your podcast, which was about Tiananmen Square and the cable.
Yes, I'm so glad you're asking me about this.
What I'm really thrilled about was when I was listening to your podcast and you were talking about how this cable came through, and it's this very, very graphic cable about what happened in Tiananmen Square for it to only literally, like days later, the embassy went, well, look, we have to print a retraction because this is utterly wrong. They weren't driving tanks over bodies and then, scooping them up with bulldozers and burning them. I just wanted to say, read that cable when it came through.
Oh, I was so excited to talk to you about this.
Oh, yeah, because I'm literally sitting there at my desk and it comes out of the ferret tube. You open the ferret tube and I know that there's an immediate telex coming in and I just bang, put it down on my desk and looked down and I went, oh, crap, this is going to get nasty. So, what was funny was I went, I saw that. I remember seeing that cable and then I think it was literally 1 or 2 days later where it was like, yeah, that, like even our analysts were like going, this doesn't sound exactly right. Like even the footage that was coming through, because there was footage coming out of Tiananmen Square, open source intelligence, that was coming through, but at no point was there any examples or any evidence of this telex coming through. The fact that Hawk read it out, that was just like, we were all at ASIO going, this could be really, really bad. Everyone just hold on to your desk. Here it comes. It was, it's but fascinating that came up, and then you managed to talk to the diplomat who actually sent the telex out and then went, actually that was wrong.
Yeah. But I mean, the fascinating thing about this, and I'm so glad you asked me about this, because we didn't quite get this into the story because it was, a very complicated story and kind of difficult to explain.
Yeah.
But the key part that I think you would be very interested in is the reason I got into this story is because I was listening to what Bob Hawke was saying in this,
in the speech.
He was reading in this speech just days after Tiananmen Square, and he was clearly reading from a piece of paper that wasn't his prepared speech. He was reading directly from the diplomatic cable. And the weird thing about it was what he was saying couldn't be verified anywhere except in a British diplomatic cable.
Ooh.
Yeah. Okay.
Ooh. That's my excited. Ooh.
I know.
Ooh.
So in 2017, a British, actually, it was first released by WikiLeaks in like 10, 12
Thanks,
years
Julian.
ago. Thanks, Julian. It was a diplomatic cable, and then it was declassified in 2017 when everybody actually reported on it. But basically, it was a diplomatic cable from the British ambassador to was actually to Hong Kong, but also to London, which described the situation in Tiananmen Square. And the weird thing about it was there was things in that cable which was identical to what Bob Hawke was saying.
Oh.
Right? And then once I actually got access to the cable, the Australian cable, I put it side by side with the British cable and found that about half of the content of both cables was identical.
Oh. Oh.
And I was going, that's exceptionally strange.
Yeah.
Why would so much of these two cables be exactly the same? They must be speaking to the same. They must have had the same
source. Yeah.
Anyway, so then I spoke to the Australian diplomat who wrote the Australian cable, and he said, yeah, well, this guy who had previously been extremely reliable to us came to the embassy and told us all this stuff, and he must have then immediately gone to the British embassy and told them all the same stuff. But he was from the faction that had lost in the internal
the wrong faction.
Fight.
Yeah.
Against the faction that ended up quashing the protest in Tiananmen Square. He was probably extremely bitter about what had happened, and so he went out and he told the Australian and British embassies incorrect information about what had happened. Both embassies sent it back to their base. Bob Hawke read it out live on television, and then years later it was released via Julian Assange and then declassified and widely reported on, even though it was incorrect information about obviously terrible things happened in Tiananmen Square. No one's denying that.
Oh, no.
Well, actually, around Tiananmen Square, not so much in the square itself, but around in the streets.
They kettled
around it. But the description of what happened and the death toll estimate were very wrong.
Oh, yeah.
But nobody had ever kind of said, actually, we actually realised that it was wrong. And it was never really published until we published it earlier this year. And so we basically had this Australian diplomat saying that all this stuff that we were told was wrong. He must have then gone and told the British embassy about it as well, and then they published it. Every news outlet in the world published on this British cable when it was declassified in 2017.
Yep.
None of them have figured out that there was a problem with it yet. I keep tweeting them going, you guys need to double check this story, guys. BBC, The Independent, all these news outlets have published this incorrect information, which is still circulating every anniversary of Tiananmen Square.
No wonder China's pissed.
It's never been corrected.
Guys, get it straight. We killed some people, but not that many.
Yeah, I mean, we're bad, but we're not that bad.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, mate, I love that story. I mean, to me, and also the fact that when you mentioned that cable, I went, I remember classifying that.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. Look, I want to keep talking. We've kind of run out of time.
Yeah, we have.
Matt, every time you're on, it's like I just want to go on and on and on and on.
It's like a little breath of fresh air.
I know, it's gregreat. Well, also it saves me talking to just David because I'm kind of over it at this point. It's been 2 years. And
You're
I'm
like talky
done.
dirt. You're talky dirt. You come in and talk and it becomes the steel of a podcast.
Thanks for joining us. I feel like we need to have you on more often because there's just so much more we could talk about.
Yeah, so much. And send me your address and I'll get you a jar of mango chutney.
I don't think I'll be sending my address to any ASIO offices, but yes, absolutely.
Send it to Michelle and she'll give it to me and I'll send you a jar of mango chutney.
Don't worry, we already have it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Dude, I'm looking at you right now.
Yeah.
But not from the angle that you think.
Through the window.